All right. Well, hi, Rick. Thank you for making some time to speak with me.
Yeah,
This is great. I'm a big fan, so I'll admit straight off the top here, I'm a little biased. I like your movies quite a bit.
thank
Listen,
you.
I did not know this, and I'm wondering if my listeners are going to know this, but I only learned recently that you actually had this really prolific career prior to being a director, where you were doing stunt work in the 80s and 90s for a ton of what were my favorite movies. And I just wondered, was directing something that you had always wanted to do and that was a path toward, or was it something that you kind of gained a desire for along the way? And maybe also kind of how does your stunt work career, how has that informed the directorial choices that you've been making?
Well, the interesting thing about it, yes, I grew up in the business, in the stunt business. My father was, considered one of the top 10 in the world, back in the pioneer days of when everything came up. And it was a great proving ground. It was a great place to be on set and watch how it worked. But up until my late teens, I was going to be a stuntman. That's all I ever wanted to do. And I got the chance to work with an amazing man that became a great mentor of mine, is Tony Scott. And I did a number of movies with Tony, and he was always the type of guy that would give you the time of day and talk to you. And when you ask questions, he wouldn't go get away from me, kid. He would really take his time and understand it. And the two things that Tony always preached, and I think he lived it, was die by your own sword, meaning don't emulate others, be your own brand, be bold to what you're telling, and be okay with it if you fall flat on your face. And so when you watched a Tony Scott movie, you knew it was a Tony Scott movie. It was very, very specific. And I think it's the hardest advice to get, but it was the best advice I ever got. And it's what gave me the bug of finding my place in the sandbox. I'm just not built to be in front of the camera. It's not my place. But I loved what the director was about and story, and that part of storytelling. And then writing became another part of it that I just loved. I always loved literature and even coming up through, my English classes and so forth. And it all just came together. But the big thing that stunts gave me is it made me the full package, because I knew all about filmmaking, but until I was working above the line and writing movies for studios and so forth, I only knew how to put a movie together, but I didn't understand the creative side. So once I understood the creative side, I had this war chest of knowledge about how to actually actualize that and make it happen. So for Kandahar, it was an amazing experience for me because I grew up in the business in a way that we went to a town and we pitched our tents because there was no infrastructure. There was no tax incentives. We just went to work. Everybody came there, right? And we live in a world today, for better or for worse, that we have tax incentives, that kind of dictate where we go. And, for better or for worse, half of those people don't really quite care what they're working on. It's a job. And they're going to go home that night to their families, not to back to the hotel or where everybody else is staying. And if a better thing comes along, they're going to take it. But, we brought 450 people to Saudi Arabia from 25 countries around the world, all
Wow.
religions, both genders, sexual orientation, you name it. And it was this huge melting pot in the middle of the Arabian desert. And we just had the greatest time. And not one person quit. They were all there for a reason. They all felt like they were a part of something really important. Important is a big word, but something that felt like it was going to be fun to tell and really do something different for the region, the Sicario of the Middle East. And there were a lot of emotional people at the end of it. It was a really, the making of was as extraordinary as getting to make something like this, just being a part of that process.
Oh, that's awesome. That answers a question I had too, which was it on location? So there you go. Actually, in Saudi Arabia, I guess that's why it looks so authentic.
Yeah,
Because
yeah, we didn't, we were not in New Mexico.
no, no,
It was
definitely
the real
not.
deal.
Well, something you actually said there about learning from Tony touches on another question I had, which was, do you feel like you have developed a style? I will tell you, I call your movies melodramatic thrillers. And
Hmm.
I mean, I'm even a big fan of National Champions. So I know it's kind of
Thank you.
sets a little bit apart from maybe some of the style of your other films or the content, the type of movies. But I just really enjoy that you tend to focus on the human moments between characters, even though people might look at your posters for your movies or the synopsises and go, oh, this guy's an action director, but you seem to really pick your spots. Is all of this very intentional for you?
When I made, yes, is the answer. When I made, I can't remember, it was either Felon, Snitch, or Shot Call. It was right in the middle of that run when I did the 3 prison movies. And I was on a panel with Eugene Jarecki, who's a great documentarian. And he had just done something on prison reform as a documentary. And I remember kind of commiserating with him going, God, I would just love to get in the weeds like you, man. You get to go so much deeper into your stories, but I got this, there's a responsibility of telling the entertainment side of it too, of hiding the peas in the mashed potatoes, creating hopefully a great form of entertainment, but having something to say and in it. And he's like, yeah, but that's the difference. You get to be on 3,000 theaters. I'm in a library, begging somebody to come see it. And I got it. I understood that. And I love that what I do, and I have a responsibility, a financial responsibility to the movies that I'm making, but I'm always looking at the humanity of stuff. And if you look at every one of my movies, to me, there's no antagonists. They're always what the subject matter is about. It's either prison, the NCAA, a comet coming to get you. And in this case, it's the cycle of violence in a region that's been like that for centuries. And it just keeps changing sides. But I wanted to show the human cost, the humanity of the region, that even the people in this divisive world that we live in, that even the people that we don't agree upon, even the people that we think that could be coming to get us, they're still just trying to get home to their families too. And that was really important to me.
Yeah, I like that too. And, you had a lot of different organizations and agencies that you pulled from for characters in this film, whether it was the CIA or the ISI or the Taliban. And I know you worked with Mitchell LaFortune, who I believe was a former military intelligence officer. Is that correct?
That is correct. He was 10 years in the DIA.
Okay, what was that collaboration like for you in the writing process? How much did he bring to making this story really feel authentic, like the setting?
Well, Mitch brought everything. He lived this, and it was inspired on true events. He was in Herat, Afghanistan for a number of years. And the first script that I read of his was this script. And we had just worked on Greenland together. I brought him on Greenland and we were doing work together. And then Basil Iwanek, who produced that movie, said, have you ever read Mitch's script? At the time it was called Burn Run. And when I read it, I just flipped over it because it humanized the Middle East in a way that I'd never seen before. But what was ironic, and I think really made the movie even more kind of original and unique, is while we were starting to prep the movie in Saudi Arabia and him giving me all the specifics about the region and how things work, the U.S. withdrawal happened out of nowhere. All the Allied forces pulled out and we had to completely rewrite the script. But at the same time, I watched Mitch, who put 10 years of his life into that war, and all the people that I know in the veteran community that I support as much as I possibly can. What the fuck were the last 20 years for? You know what I mean? Why did all my friends die? Why did the people that we left behind, what's going to happen to them? Why do I not know my son or daughter? Because I spent more time overseas than I with them. And it became a very common theme that we wanted the movie to be about, which is that it's more about all is lost. If the last 20 years were all for nothing, are we just back to going to scratch now? And where does that pick up? Where do we pick up the pieces? A man like Tom, like the Jerry Butler plays, he's addicted to war. It's the only thing he knows is that's his drug. That's his heroin, right? Is getting into the action of it. And other people that are just now fighting for that land grab and how they're going to, cut up and pick apart Afghanistan, but how they're just doing their jobs and they're not policymakers. They're the enforcers. They have to go do their job. So it was interesting to get his perspective on it. But the other thing that was really amazing for me was being a Westerner coming to the Middle East and just really paying attention. And that's Tony Scott's, my own father, that always said, pay attention to your surroundings and absorb what is happening. And it was those details of watching how the entire Middle East region is kind of like the America right now, where there's the conservative movement versus the progressive movement. And that is very indicative of what's going on in the Middle East. You have the ultra conservatives that do not want anything to change over the last, 100 millions of years. And there's a progressive movement now that is trying to do everything differently. A young kid, like a young ISI operator like Kahil Ali Fazal plays, coming out of a madrasa and suddenly having a vape pen and Gucci sunglasses while he's talking to his boss, who's hearing the call to prayer, and he's a devout man that's staying devout, but yet our guy jumps in a Range Rover listening to hip hop. That's not gratuitous. That is real. That's exactly what is happening over there right now. And so we wanted those layers to really come into the details of this movie finally being a movie where the Middle East can go, yeah, see, this is what we are. This is what's going on. The way Sicario showed the drug war in Mexico.
That's a great comparison. I like that. And I actually am a vet myself, who's 15 and a half years plus, and I've been over there, and I can say for sure it is absolutely like that now. Did you?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Did you have an intention of, I don't want to say that I hate the words message movie. Okay. So I'm going to preface this with that, but it feels pointed that your script, or you and Mitch's script, is kind of trying to say that we didn't treat our interpreters well enough. And it's interesting because this comes right on the heels of Guy Ritchie's movie, which has a very similar kind of, not the stories. The stories are very different. I hope people understand that and don't think they're just getting the same movie, because they're different movies, but they do both seem to have a healthy respect for the Afghan interpreters. Was that an intentional point you wanted to make?
Not as specific as their movie. Their movie was about an interpreter. What I wanted the movie in, and I'm okay with message. What I don't want is I don't want to tell you my opinion. I don't want to beat you over the head and get on my own little soapbox and tell you what I think about prison reform, what I think about in this change, what's going to fix the Middle East. What I wanted to show was warts and all from a lens of people that are such as yourself, that we go into these countries and we're doing the greater good, and lives are disrupted. And then when we pull out, we're leaving a whole place in ruins where it's all is lost. It was less about the interpreter. It was more about the whole region itself, right? It was Vietnam. It's about Iraq. It's about Afghanistan. What's going on in Ukraine? What's going to happen to that country when all of this is over and said and done, even if they win, against Russia? It has much more about the human cost and the human toil. And I think a lot of them, I'm not speaking for you, but a lot of the veterans that I know and that I've talked to and that I do as much support as I possibly can, including my documentary on a Delta Force operator, that which I love destroys me, is that I think a lot of people see over there on the television screen. So they're looking at something that is like voyeurism, that is just a piece of like war something going on. They see a building collapse, somebody coming out with their baby crying, but that's not somebody I know and I have no emotional attachment. I wanted this movie to kind of, the message of it is, remember the human cost, remember the human toil and the human carnage that happens in war. War is a necessary thing. There are bad people that need to be taken down, but never forget the things that we go through. I wanted the movie to be a bit bigger on that, to even have empathy for the people chasing me. And I remember a lot of the guys that I talked to had talked about that they knew that even the guys they were fighting were not the policymakers. They were just there doing, enforcing the policy that they were given, and that they understood that.
Totally. I love it, because I think about that all the time. You think about like, oh, the stormtroopers are they're just going to work. They don't choose who they're attacking. And that goes through any type of story in general and real life too. So this is your third film now with Gerard Butler. I love that you call him Jerry. I refuse to do that. I don't know him well enough to go there, but Mr. Gerard Butler, one of our just most beloved stars. And as I understand it, you have two more in the works with him for sequels for the Fallen series and Greenland both. Has he become your muse? Just tell me what has been drawing you to continue working together, and what's that like?
Well, the three movies that we've done, what I like is that we never did the same character. Like the very first movie was fun, and he and I talked about it with Angel Has Fallen, I said, let's reinvent this franchise in a way of what the 70s and the 50s did, which is our characters were real. They were relatable. They weren't 10 feet tall and bulletproof. They weren't impervious to pain. They weren't flawless. They were damaged individuals that had their own demons. Bullets hit them and they fucking hurt, and a lot of them died. And let's get back to that. And he loved it. It's like, let's go into pain pills. Mike Banning is addicted to pain pills because he is a man that is trying not to hang up the gun, and he's trying to beat his own mortality. How many of us can relate to that? If you're an athlete, if you're a first responder, military, it doesn't matter, right? We all We all, when we do physical jobs, are trying to beat our own mortality. I'm doing it to this day, but it was fun to play that version of an action guy, right? And then to do Greenland, where there's no action hero, there's nothing but a normal man that has no special skills, nothing. He just has his heart and his integrity, and trying to atone for a failed marriage, and come to terms with that and deal with it. What Kandahar did is it put it all together. And that's what I loved it for him, is Kandahar did it where he was never an action hero. He was a man of action. He did have special skills as an operator would at that level, but he came from a human point of view of it and came to terms of, this is what we do. We come here and we tell you what to do. That, like, so many of the veterans that I know are really, upset about what happened. And I wanted some of that lens to come through with him, but I love the fact that he never, at least I hope so, that he never comes off as an action hero. He comes out of as a real man of that's within action, has special skills, but also is lost in the fact that how many of your peers that where you get into adrenaline addiction, right? It's the addiction to war. And a lot of people don't understand what happened with 9/11. If you have people going through cycles more than ever in history of war, and that they get that addiction is very real. It's not people running from war. They're trying to get back in it.
Yeah.
And we wanted to show that through his character.
It's what they know. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's part of that is because of the lack of action. I think that he doesn't feel like an action star. He only have a couple moments where he's really even shooting things. But the big set piece in this movie that is phenomenal, there's this lengthy dramatic sequence with a helicopter at night, and the helicopter's pursuing the protagonists. I won't give away the details of what happens, but you integrate night vision into this sequence. And I just thought it was stunning to look at. And I wanted to know how it was shot and how hard it was to effectively light this scene for both theater audiences and all the myriad of home setups that you're going to have to play on. I mean, it's got to be a challenge, but what was it like kind of crafting that sequence?
The helicopter sequence was one, it was very dangerous because we were doing a lot of stuff at night. But it was also, to me, it was always the theme of Jaws in the sky. It was about people not realizing that when you can hear something and you can't see it, it's even more scary because you don't know where it's coming from. Visually, I didn't want the Middle East to look like the last 20 years of films where they were always, dirty, dusty, desaturated, really dismal looking. I wanted to show the beauty of the region, but how do you show the desert at night when it's pitch black in the desert? And that's where we came up with the idea of that not only is there normal infrared, the night vision that many countries use, including us, but that Tier 1 now is using fusion technology, right? Which is mirroring infrared with thermal together, and the fact that you can change your own color patterns and so forth. And I was like, there you go. Now I get to be Ansel Adams at night. I get to do an Ansel Adams painting and show you the desert at night in a very, very different way. And so that was a fun kind of, incubation period about how we would show the nighttime deserts versus seeing the huge light source in the sky. I wanted to look like it was always under moonlight when it was dark, and that you just saw like what our own eyes see at night with the shadows of things around us. Mm-hmm. And then to punch in on our Ansel Adams shots with the fusion technology that that Jerry's character wears.
Man, they're good. It's so great. I think less is more, and it hits harder and it's more impactful because it's not just a constant flow of action. When that lengthy time happens, it is worth the wait.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
I'll do two quick ones to end. One, I felt like you left this open, and I just got to ask, is the script written in a way that you may have further ideas for these characters if you in the future, or is that just me reading into things?
No, I think we didn't do it on purpose to go, oh my God, we got sequels to do, but we also didn't want it wrapped up in a neat little bow, right? Okay. Because that's not life. We wanted certain people not to die and other people that need to perish and feel their pain. Like my thing was not to have any gratuitous death that we don't feel. And by the way, we have somebody in the movie that you're pretty satisfied when that person dies, but there are other people that you're heartbroken because you saw them with their wife and their child and you understood that they were just trying to get back home too. So we wanted everything to have different kind of feelings of it, but also the mirror of not only our protagonist that Jerry plays, Tom, but the Pakistani character who's kind of his mirror image, right? The hunter and the hunted. It's kind of like Heat, right? They're not
A
so
lot like
different.
it.
At
Yeah.
the end of the day, they're not so different.
Yeah. Great. Well, on our podcast, we kind of approach things back from an emotional perspective. We really, really dig into feelings, hence the name Feelin' Film. We really like to kind of just latch on to what a movie does to our emotions. And so we like to ask guests this question. Is there any movie that you can think of in recently that you've seen that evoked a strong emotional reaction from yourself? What might come to mind? And it could be any emotion whatsoever, but just a movie that really got underneath your skin and made you feel something.
Man, I just ran a blank. There are definitely movies that I always go back to and watch, but they're not recent movies, but they're
That's fine.
movies that are very Apocalypse Now is something
Okay.
that'll always get me. Heat, the Blade Runner, the original Blade Runner. Just there's so many great stories, but then other ones like Lion, was an amazing, extraordinary movie. So yeah, and I mean, my wife and I laugh. I mean, because there's no way we can watch Marley and Me about the dog and Owen Wilson, because forget about it. If
You
if your
can't.
thing's
Yeah.
feeling for film, there you go, right there. Anybody that doesn't cry in that movie doesn't have a heart, doesn't understand animals.
I agree totally. Well, thank you again for coming on. I really appreciate the time. This has been awesome. It's an honor to get to speak with you, and I'm excited for what you're doing next. The news just dropped about Cliffhanger 2, and that's a favorite of mine. So, you're gonna work with Sly. Let's do it.
The next evolution begins, my friend. We'll be back to talk about it.
Sounds good. Well, good luck and best of luck with the movie release here coming up soon.
Thanks, Aaron. I appreciate your time, bud.
All right. Thanks, Rick.
Cheers.